Good morning. My name is Dennis Glackin. I am the vice chair of the St. Michael's Climate Change Sea Level Rise Commission. My background is as a city planner. I spent most of my career in the Philadelphia area doing city planning work for various municipalities, institutions, developers. I've lived in St. Michael's for the past 11 years full time since I retired. And being down here, I've been very aware of climate change and particularly sea level rise. My house is about a block and a half from the water, so I'm able to drive by it or look at it virtually every day and see the changes just in the 11 years I've been here. So today, what I'd like to discuss is some actionable strategies that a small town like St. Michael's has taken and give you several examples of case studies of the things that we're working on, kind of what's worked, what hasn't worked, and some of the pitfalls we've run across as we've gone through this over the years. So with that, I'll just start. Is that all right?
Sounds great to me.
Okay. So most of you may or may not know about St. Michael's. We're a small town. It's only about 1.2 square miles. We're located on Maryland's eastern shore. The town was founded around 1680, but it was really settled more in the middle of the 1850s. The town is very flat, as is most of the eastern shore. The elevation varies from about 0 to 8 feet above mean sea level. So you can see how the sea level changes will affect this town over the coming years. Population is a little over 1,300 last time we checked. And we're surrounded by two water bodies, the Miles River on the east side and San Domingo Creek on the west side. This is a map which shows the Miles River on the right side of the plan. The town is located kind of in this area. You see we have several little harbor areas. And this is Talbot Street, which is the main road through town, Route 33. And we have frontage on the San Domingo Creek, which runs into Broad Creek, into the Choptank River, and of course into the bay. And we have a relatively small area of frontage there. It's only about 7/10 of a mile. Some of the issues that the town has been faced with, and everyone really I guess in the Eastern Seaboard to some level or another, has been global warming, which obviously is caused by fossil fuel burning, which has been warming the planet. And this has caused the polar ice caps to melt, leading to higher water levels. And the water, as it's warmed, has expanded, which we call thermal expansion. So the sea level rise has been over about the last 100 years about a foot in this area. And this is all according to the Maryland Center for Environmental Science sea level rise projections for Maryland. And it's projected that there'll be about an equal amount, in other words, 1 foot over the next or this half century from 2000 to 2050. So you can see how it's expected that the sea level rise will continue at even a higher rate. We've been bothered by nuisance flooding, which are really normal high tides or sunny day flooding. There's no storm in the vicinity. There's no heavy winds, but there are some winds that are driving the water up the bay, and we get some flooding from nuisance flooding. Storm surge, of course, when there's a hurricane or a really bad storm. For instance, there was a storm, Melissa, that was out in the Atlantic. It was probably several hundred miles off the coast, but it really caused us to have some storm surge flooding as it passed up the East Coast. And subsidence, which is due to water extraction and ice movements during the last ice age. So these are the issues that kind of make up what we're faced with here in St. Michael's. Here's an example of sunny day flooding, beautiful blue skies, no wind, yet there was some wind somewhere in the bay that caused the flooding to come up into the streets like this. And this is not a unusual occurrence. So based on some of the projections that we've seen from the state of Maryland, sea level rise could rise by between 1 foot and 1.6 feet by the year 2050, and by 2100, 2 feet to 3.5 feet. So the town has decided to use as a goal a sea level rise of about 2.4 feet, a normal high tide of additional foot, and a tidal surge of 1.28 feet for a total of 4.7 feet. So our target increase in terms of the protections we're trying to do around town has been 5 feet. The town is heavily bulkheaded at present. We have, as I said, harbor areas, particularly on the east side on the Miles River, and they're not effective anymore, or not as effective for a lot of the occurrences that we see. There are some softer shorelines that we have around town, which I'll get to it, so it'll be back up a second. But this is an example of sea level rise that's due to sunny day flooding and from just a normal high tide. This is a chart that was developed by the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum's Harbor Flooding Task Force report. And this has, again, been very interesting in terms of our planning. You can see on the left side here, we have feet above present mean sea level, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4, 5, and 6 feet. Most of the town is in the 2 to 3 foot area in terms of the bulkheading around town. So at present, we see flooding somewhere between 2 events, which I think is not really the right number, and 35. So the number is probably somewhere in between there. But that's what we're seeing today. By 2050, which is what our charge was by the town commission to look at flooding through 2050, you can see it at 2 feet. If we do nothing in those areas where it's 2 feet, it'll flood 476 times a year. Now you're saying there's only 365 days in a year, but there's 2 tides per day. So you can see that'll happen every day. At 3 feet, it happens, it's projected to be 76 times. Once you get to 4 feet of protection, it really drops down to 5 feet or 5 times, which is, manageable. And at 5 feet, 3 times. So you might say, well, why don't you just go to 4 feet? Well, then we looked at 2075, and you can see there's a major change in the projections between 4 feet and 5 feet to 2075. So we settled on the 5 feet as what we would try and do in terms of any improvements that we make. This again is a map showing what I was just trying to explain, and this is flooding up to 5 feet. Again, the Miles River is on the right-hand side of the plan. This is the harbor area through town, and the light blue areas represent the projected flooding to 5 feet. This entire area through here is the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, which obviously they're going to have some serious issues to deal with. The town harbor is through this area, and this is an area that would flood almost up to Talbot Street. So you can see where the water has flooded or is projected to flood over where it is today, which is the current Miles River area. We have the other issue is, as we've confronted all these problems, is kind of the second issue of stormwater not draining. As we have a situation where when you have a heavy rain and you have a high tide, you have water being directed to the rivers, and yet you have the rivers rising, so the water has, in effect, no place to go. This is an example where water has backed up the street into a culvert at this location and into these people's backyards, simply because the water cannot drain out because the pipes that normally would drain the water are underwater. And I'll show you our projected or proposed solution to that as we get into this. So in 2021, the town created this Climate Change Sea Level Rise Commission. It's a seven-member appointed commission to prepare the town for the future. We've completed studies, conceptual plans, and in some cases, construction plans for the improvements to the town's waterfront areas due to projected sea level rise to 2050. This initial study was funded by DNR and a harbor stormwater infrastructure study in 2020, which identified the most high-risk areas in town. There are several planning solutions to how to deal with this issue. You can turn hardscape into green space. You've probably have heard the term sponge city, where you basically try and absorb the water closer to the water and not have hard surfaces there. The use of berms to hold back water. Cisterns or holding tanks, which are underground, and I have an example of that I'll show you later on. Of course, you can raise the bulkhead, living shorelines. Can raising your structures. We have one gentleman who's going to raise his house because of flooding that he's experiencing or thinks he will be experiencing in the future. Raising roads, municipal roads, and managed retreat, where you just abandon the property, the house, the business, whatever it may be, and take it back to its natural state. This is an example of a berm. This is in Oxford, and how they're treating some of the dealing with the stormwater along the Strand in Oxford. This is an example of the cistern that I was saying is underground, where you have a storm drain that takes the water in, is basically held in a chamber underground, and then pumped out once the tides recede and the water can go back into the river. This is obviously an expensive solution. You have maintenance issues with it. It's expensive to put it in. Um, but really the maintenance is something that we're concerned about, and how much we implement this type of solution. This is an example of a living shoreline. This is along San Domingo Creek, and this is an example again of kind of a soft solution where this is used to hold back the water and take care of wave action. And this is much of the San Domingo Creek area of the town is like this. In 2023, we received a grant from FEMA through MDEM, Maryland Department of Environmental Management, Emergency Management. This was Project Area 1, which was to deal with harbor flooding and the stormwater mitigation project along Mill Street, Burn Street, Honeymoon Bridge, Cherry Street, and Harbor Walkway. Now that area is, again, if you may or may not know St. Michael's, this is the Maritime Museum. This is Mill Street. This was the former town municipal building. The marina across the street here, and the center of town is kind of off the photo a little bit. So the issues in dealing with this is there was flooding on Mill Street, which cut off access to the Maritime Museum, which currently is like their secondary access. It would cut off the access to this municipal building, which the town is still trying to decide what to do with. We did move the government functions out of there in the past year or so. And you have the buildings along here. You have a bed and breakfast located in this location. So we felt that these uses, this is the Crab Claw Restaurant, which is kind of a local landmark, the Maritime Museum, the future use of this building, felt that these were important uses that need to be safe and have predictable access. This is Mill Street, an example of the flooding we see on Mill Street when we have the high tides and the levels are up. This is a picture from September 2020. This is a good example again of sunny day flooding, beautiful skies, people out in shorts, and the water up to their ankles. This is the map showing the projection that our engineer, who has been RAL Engineering, has put together, showing water levels to the 5-foot elevation at 2050. These are buildings that are owned by the Maritime Museum. This is the private residence, bed and breakfast, old municipal building. And you can see this is an area that we're trying to control the flooding in through some of the improvements. The promenade where you saw that fellow standing in the water is along this area here. So there's a 6-foot walkway there. And this section shows water levels at 5 feet at 2050. So you can see this obviously doesn't work. And these people are up to their waist in water if we do nothing. So the proposal was to raise the bulkhead, increase the walkway in terms of the width, and then we would fill behind it so that we're not creating a lake or a detention pond behind the walkway. So there would be fill and raise in the bulkhead, and that would give us protection to 2050 and somewhat beyond that. The other piece of this was Cherry Street. This is a street, a dead-end street in the town, which leads to Honeymoon Bridge. And that then in turn leads to access to the Maritime Museum, which is in the background in this location. This floods, so you can't really get to the bridge, and there's flooding on the other side. So while the bridge itself doesn't flood, access to and from the bridge does flood. So at the end of the day, our proposal was to raise Mill Street. We had gone through several what ifs in terms of 4 feet, 5 feet, and even 6 feet in terms of raising the street. And we settled on 5 feet. There were issues with access to buildings. This is Maritime Museum properties here, private residence in this location. So we settled on 5 feet so that we felt could make that work so that the grades into their driveways still worked. New sidewalk, landscaping. Mill Street continued down to Burn Street, which gave you direct access to the Crab Claw Restaurant. These are buildings owned by the Maritime Museum, and the improvement along that promenade with the raised bulkhead is all along this area. This is Honeymoon Bridge, which would be rebuilt, basically to look just like it looks today, except a little wider. And then this part of Cherry Street would be raised. That was that last slide where I showed you this flooding. This would be raised also to the 5 foot level. And that was the plan. This plan is in construction, has construction documents prepared. We're ready for permits, and when and if funding is available, we will be likely applying for this to be the first major project that we're able to do. The second project area was Muskrat Park, which is a town park, Church Street, and Mulberry Streets. And again, this was funded through the FEMA Advanced Assistance Grant. This is an area in town that's more or less in the center of town. This is Muskrat Park. This location, there's a relatively small bulkhead area here. This is Foxy's Restaurant. If you've been to St. Michael's, you're well familiar with that. Blue Miles and a marina, which has a fuel dock in here. Houses back up to the park. You have a historic church. Christ Church is located in this location. Post office and retail stores with Route 33 and Talbot Street being the top left of the drawing. This is very interesting. We're finished with some concept plans for this, and we're into the construction drawing part. But one of the things we've confronted is this wall to the church has a columbarium on the other side of it. So there are ashes in this wall. And we've been very reluctant to kind of do too much in terms of raising the street, in terms of what the impact would be on this wall. So in this location, we're probably only going to be able to go to 4.5 feet and not get to the 5, simply because we want to minimize any damage to that wall, which is part of a historic church. So the solution that we've come up with is to basically allow Muskrat Park to have some level of flooding. We thought that if a park floods for 6, 8 hours or a half a day or even more, that kind of not be the end of the world. And to use the 5 foot level, which in this case is 4.5 feet, along the roads. So we would raise the roads, this being Willis Street, Church Street. Again, the church is right here. That wall I showed you is right on this location. The post office parking lot and a little piece of Mulberry Street. So this is currently in the construction drawing stage. We expect to have this done by July. So this would be, again, ready for permitting and funding after that. The other piece of this was the end of Mulberry Street. Mulberry Street has access to the marina, which is around the corner, the Blue Miles restaurant. You can see where the edge of the water is by these pilings, where watermen use as an unloading area. And this is probably one of the worst areas in terms of flooding in the town. One complication here is that you have the Blue Miles restaurant and the marina and Foxy's, and they're all owned by one entity. They realize that they will need to do something in the future. but they do not have plans at present and no timetable to really do it. So while we could raise the road to 5 feet, if we did it tomorrow, we'd have to figure out, and we have figured out a way to transition down to their elevation, or we wait till they're ready to do something and we do this together where the town would do the public improvement and they would do the private improvement. So this, while again, we'll have the construction drawings ready to go to 5 feet here, this is likely not to move forward until we have some idea of what is happening with the adjacent property owner. The third project area is a study over on West Harbor Road, East 2 Avenue, in the waterfront area. DNR funded the concept plan that was completed here in December of 2023, and DNR has funded our construction documents, which we are in the process of finalizing some paperwork and will be doing this year to prepare construction documents for this area. Again, an example of flooding. This street gets ribboned off by the police a couple times a year because of the flooding through here. You can see again the edge of the water, edge of the bulkhead where these pilings are. This area has the bulkhead at approximately 3 feet in elevation. So think back to that earlier slide, which I showed you the expected flooding situations. Boat slips are in need of replacement. There's 48 parking spaces now. And the parking area is all hard packed, impervious. It's not paved, it's stone, but it's packed down so much it really is impervious. Has poor pedestrian access. People stay at the St. Michael's Harbor Inn and they walk in the street to get to town, and that creates somewhat of a issue. Lighting is intense in some spots, dull in others. So what the concept plan objectives were to mitigate the flooding in the study area from both sea level rise and stormwater, which again is a difficult issue to handle. Improve boating and pedestrian access, increase the amount of green space, and provide conceptual plans for the basis of our final design and funding. So the conclusion was that we would raise the bulkhead to 5 feet. There would be new piers and pilings. There would be a boardwalk, walkway, promenade along the water's edge at the top of the new bulkhead for pedestrians to get them out of the street and be able to walk safely into town. And we reduced the impervious parking spaces from 48 to 42, and overall impervious from 98% paved today to about 65%. The proposed improvements also included a closing of one of the boat ramps. We have a small boat ramp, which is essentially used for kayak launching and really doesn't get that much usage, but improved a large boat ramp, which gets very heavy usage in the summer. Provide a new kayak launch off of East 2 Street, rain gardens for critical area requirements, a small mini park, and low-level lighting. So this is the small boat ramp. And again, this regularly has water coming up the ramp and into the street. So this would be closed off in the plan. This is the large boat ramp over here, which we would need to raise up a bit. And that would definitely need to stay because that's an important part of the town and the boating issues. So at the end of the day, the plan was to create, as I said, a small mini park at the corner of, this is East 2 Street. That was that very first slide where I showed you the flooding in the street. And this is West Harbor Road. This is the St. Michael's Harbor Inn. So we would start with a green area down here along East 2 Street. This would be the new kayak launch. This is the walkway that I talked about, which would be right along the water's edge. Critical area rain gardens, these dark green areas. And the smaller green areas would be where we were reducing or eliminating parking and introducing some green areas, some landscaping into the drawings. These would be the new slips. The goal is to keep as many slips as we have today. These are rented out by the town to the town and to residents of Talbot County. And this whole project we have is roughly estimated to be about $3.4 million. And we currently have an application to DNR for a portion of that funding, which we hope to get over a couple of years, which would enable us to actually implement this. These are I'll show you two of the important parts of this. These are the inlets or the outfall now from the stormwater. And you can see in this picture, it's partially submerged. You can't really raise these because it impacts the whole town in terms of the stormwater system, and it's just not feasible. So what we do is we put a tide gate on the edge of the pipe so that water would not back up and into that gentleman's backyard, as I showed you earlier. But when it rained, this would open, and if the water was down, it would come out. Um, if you get a heavy rain, this would obviously fill up, and if the water was up high in the river, this would fill up with water, and there may be some backage, but at least you wouldn't have water on a normal day backing up into people's yards. This is again how the pump would work. It would be underground in the parking areas, and I think I explained earlier this would receive this excess stormwater, which would then be pumped out. Another area we moved to, and this portion of the project of the town's work has been funded again by DNR. This is along San Domingo Creek and the west side of the town. This was for the design, permitting, construction of a living shoreline, which we're in the middle of right now. The tide gate study. We had completed the study, and a living shoreline design is completed, and we're waiting for DNR's approval to go forward with that. This is Gray Street. This is one of the streets that, again, floods regularly in that area. You can see the flooding is basically up to this gentleman's front door, back or side door. And this is a drawing that was prepared by Bayland Associates, which was our consultants on this side of the town, which showed the existing water areas. And these are areas that were projected to flood by somewhere between 1 and 3 feet in the future, as is 2050. This is a pedestrian bridge that I'll get to in a second that became an issue that we want to talk about. The first thing we did was we looked at this little piece of bulkhead which is falling into the water, and you have a living shoreline on either side of it. So what we've got approval for from DNR is to remove this and create a living shoreline, so this shoreline would be consistent. This is a town park. And this is, as I said, it's all designed, it's permitted, and we're just waiting for final approval from DNR to go ahead and build a living shoreline this summer. The bridge I talked about, this is right here, and you can see there's like a small area that leads into this larger area up here where the water is. This is the bridge. So we thought that if we could control the water at this point, it would in fact protect the properties above the bridge. And we came up with a solution, or the consultants came up with a solution for a tide gate, which would be a series of chambers, as shown on the left, would be put in front of the bridge, and these would close when tides got up to 5 feet, or they could be set at any level you want, but certainly by 5 feet they would close, and that would protect the areas that are shown in red here from flooding. Now, this is one piece of our work to date that's caused some citizen concerns. We've had great support from the town commissioners. We've had great support from the residents so far, but everybody was not sold on the tide gate here. I think largely because of aesthetics. We did a study, told the town what it would cost to do this, and the town basically said, let's put this on hold for now, and we'll maybe come back to this later. So this was one piece that's been a little controversial, and whether it gets done or not, it's hard to say. So I mentioned about raising structures and properties before. Well, one of the gentlemen along this area is in the process of having his house raised because of these projections. So our final thoughts as I conclude this is that sea level rise is an ongoing threat along the Chesapeake Bay and Eastern Shore. There's areas in Oxford and Cambridge, Dorchester County that perhaps would have as bad or worse situations than we do. So it's not just St. Michael's that is faced with this. Solutions are a multi-year process. As I said, we started this in 2021. Here it is 5 years later, and while we have plans prepared and we have permits, and at least in one case, and we're always searching for money to do these things. I mean, they're not cheap. So it's a multi-year process, and it's really, I guess, behooves everyone to get started early and work the way through it. It requires support of elected officials, but which we have, but they have other municipal needs. There's a new park that's being built in town. We may need a new water system in parts of the town, or a third well is what it is. So you're competing with that in terms of limited funds for a small town like this. Having partners is very important. The Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum has been a super partner for us and has been very much supportive of the work we're doing near their campus. Division, the Choptank, has been helpful on the San Domingo Creek side, and the Alliance for the Chesapeake has indicated a willingness to help us with funding and some ideas on green infrastructure. Our important financial partners are obviously the state and federal governments. The state has been very supportive and has given us several grants. The federal government was supportive, but things have kind of changed there in the last year or so. So we're not sure what's going to happen in the future in terms of future funding. So that concludes my presentation. I do want to give credit where some of these drawings came from the St. Michael's Comprehensive Plan, Rao Engineering, GMB is another engineering firm, Bayland Consultants, Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, St. Michael's Flood Watch, and the sea level projections for Maryland to 2023. Thank you.
Wow, Dennis, that was very comprehensive. Thank you so much. Do you have a few minutes for some questions?
I do.
All right, great. I think I have four questions in time, but I'll get through as many as I can. Um, so I guess my question for you is what originally attracted you to St. Michael's 11 years ago? Were you aware of the sea level rise and coastal flooding prior to you moving there, or was this a new phenomenon when you got there?
Well, what attracted me to St. Michael's was sailing.
Okay.
Um, I've sailed for, I don't know, 30 years, 30, 40 years. And we like to race, and most of the racing happens out of Annapolis.
hmm
And St. Michael's seemed to have the small town atmosphere that we were looking for, but yet close enough so I could participate in the races that my wife and I like to do. So that's what attracted me in the first place. In terms of sea level rise, working in Philadelphia wasn't at the top of the list.
hmm hmm
Um, so really, it didn't really hit me till I came down here. I had my municipal background, my
hmm
planning background, and this seemed an area that I could really get interested in. And as I said, I live very close to the water, so can see the results as I walk around town. So yeah, it was really something I've come to in the past 11 years or so since I've been here.
Are you an ice sailor as well? I hear that's a thing out in the Eastern Shore.
No,
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 okay.
no. It needs to be 60 and rising before I go out.
Right. Okay, got it. Got it. It's interesting. Living here in Randallstown on the Western Shore, when I hear about climate change and sea level rise on the news, I think of Miami, I think of, Louisiana. Very rarely do we think of the Eastern Shore. And very rarely is it like, well, it doesn't necessarily affect me, kind of, I guess, good luck, guys. But it wasn't until I started working with Alex and Lisa Green with Harriet Tubman Tours, and I would make treks out to take their tour from time to time. And I remember they had a speaking event here in Baltimore at the Maryland Historical Society, and Tom Horton was speaking about his movie High Tide in Dorchester. He was one of the panelists,
Right.
and Alex was one of the panelists as well, just talking about how sea level rise and climate change is affecting his tour business. And it immediately clicked for me at that time that things that I'm passionate about, whether it's housing and history, are definitely being affected by this. And And the fact that, as a real estate practitioner, the buildings that I lease and sell and work with clients on, are a major part of this greenhouse gas problem. So that is actually the genesis and of why we started Climate Tech 2024, 2025, and now we're on our third year of 2026. It's because of, watching Rona Cabell's Eroding History movie on PBS, and meeting, people like Vincent Leggett with Blacks in the Chesapeake. What is what do those films do for bringing awareness to what's happening on the Eastern Shore, especially for people who might think that it's not like their problem?
It's difficult because one concern we've had, and it really hasn't borne out yet, but the people who live near the water, like myself,
Hmm.
see this every day, and you can see the future impacts on the historic church, the Maritime Museum, which is a major institution in town, and so you can see that. But as you get further away from the water, say like in the town of Easton or inland further, I think it's a lot like where my head was before I came down here. Like, oh, it affects other people and it's not my problem. And so that's something we have to deal with. And I think in terms of funding, I think of that a lot because, again, if the town, for instance, were to, say, assess people for part of the money they would need to do this, I mean, the federal government was providing close to 100%. And some of the grant programs provide 75%. So there's usually at least a small part that's due from the local municipality. And I've wondered how, if when that comes to pass, how the people will react to, again, it doesn't affect them immediately. So it's an educational process.
Yeah,
And like I said, so far so good, but we haven't got to the point where we're actually asking people to be taxed or to be assessed for some of these improvements.
sure.
And I hope we don't get there, but
Right,
I don't know.
right, right. So for people who are not familiar with the area, I mean, this is the birthplace of Frederick Douglass, right? I mean, he was born 10, 15 miles northeast
Yes.
of
Yeah,
of St. Michael. Say again?
spent some time here.
Yes.
Um, we have
Yes.
a very tiny little park in town that where he was close to living, where he lived at one point.
Hmm. So just to give folks who aren't from the area some context of what we're talking about, there's a lot of history out in this area. Um, I guess is there much new construction out there? Are there builders or developers that are either doing new construction or retrofit and making these homes, more healthy and smart and more climate resilient? Is that a thing out there?
Yes, there's a major effort at rehabilitation and improvement of houses.
Hmm.
You see solar panels on roofs more and
Hmm.
more through
Hmm.
this area.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of room in the town in terms of new construction. It's usually a building lot here and there.
Urban,
Although
like infill. Yeah.
the
Hmm.
town just approved 27 townhouse units. Just it's in the town, but it's just at the edge of town.
Hmm.
They just approved those, which is may that'll probably be the biggest development the town's had in a number of years.
Hmm.
There's been a major development in Trap, which is,
Hmm.
I guess, as the crow flies, 20 miles or so, 25
Hmm.
miles from here, which is, I
Hmm.
think, for over 2,000 units.
Hmm.
So there's some major developments in the eastern area and Trap area, but down here it's pretty minor.
Hmm. Hmm. And you mentioned a someone that was raising their home, and I got to see it in the movie, just kind of in the Tom Horton High Tide and Dorchester movie about how they actually raised the homes. I think
Right.
in the documentary they were raising it 8 feet. Is that similar to what's happening? Are they raising it higher or just about the same amount? Or
I know in the Maritime Museum just built a new welcome center, and
okay,
they had their first floor elevation set at 9 feet.
wow.
So I think in terms of whatever he ends up doing, and again, I don't know for sure, but I would guess he's going to be in the 7, 8, 9 feet area
Mhm.
when he does this, because I'm sure he only wants to do it once.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of our themes is, American history, especially with, coming up on the America 250 celebration, that American history and shared memories are floating away. And we often talk about how, what we're talking about, folks, this is the area of the country where soul food was invented, where the American cuisine was
Right.
created, the history of the crabbing industry, right? Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and many, many others. But this is the area that's being affected by that, and it's quickly kind of floating away. But with folks like Dennis and others and his team, they're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have to try to save as much of that area as possible. What can people on the Western Shore and the rest of the nation do to assist you in your efforts in this to make it a little bit better? Because we believe that the change for climate change starts at home, right? There's certain things we can do at home or in our offices to help you on a global level, but what can somebody do? What would you recommend?
I mean, our biggest need right now is a reliable source of funding.
Mm, hmm
DNR has been a great partner,
hmm
but they have limited resources. And if we could get the federal government to be a reliable partner, I think that would be terrific. Um, One thing I forgot to mention, or I should mention, when you were talking about the historic issues around town, our biggest industry right now is the tourism industry, and that's what keeps this town alive in a lot of respects. And again, if you remember a couple of those maps I showed you, where the flooding that would be projected to go into the town and along the edges there, that would have a drastic effect on the viability of this town to take care of itself and to fund itself as going forward. So I think in terms of thinking about people who aren't on the water or near the water, I think that would definitely impact them also.
Well, you lead me into our theme for Maryland Climate Tech 2027 is on ecotourism and how the tourism is industry, whether it's hospitality or museums, arts and cultural institutions, how are they adapting to these types of climate issues, not only in Maryland but across the globe, and kind of what's working, what are some solutions? But like I said, when I think of climate change, when I hear it on the news, it's Miami, and it's Louisiana, but Dorchester County, St. Michael's, that area is actually feeling the effects. What I say all the time is sea level rise is California's forest fire, but we seem to be losing a lot more
Right.
homes here on the West Coast, on the East Coast, than they are losing. They're both disastrous, but
Right.
it's real time right now, and it's happening even on a sunny day, right? These sunny
Happened on
day
a sunny,
flooding.
happened on a sunny day, and on the Western Shore, I mean, Maryland or Annapolis has a major program along their city dock area
hmm hmm
that they're in the middle of. They've started some construction, I believe, over there. So it's hit the Western Shore too, but it seems to be maybe a little worse here on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. Connor from UMSES was one of our presenters as well. The University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science is a partner for this year's event, and Connor, who works there, he's one of the scientists there. Was showing a picture of downtown Annapolis and just how the Naval Academy, some of the streets in and around the Naval Academy were flooding. And no, that wasn't Connor. That was actually Nick from Preservation Maryland. Excuse me, I had my presenters mixed up. But yeah, Nick from Preservation Maryland, who's doing a lot of work to help preserve, some of the historic properties on the Eastern Shore as well. So this has been great, Dennis. Your contact information will magically appear on the screen, so people can reach out if they want to visit your area or maybe make a donation and be able to help your efforts. So, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want people to know about yourself or the work that you're doing, or what's happening
Yeah,
out there?
I just, if this could help some people understand what's going on in terms of sea level rise, I think that would be a great outcome for this session. And I just want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
My pleasure. Always willing to extend an invitation to someone that bleeds orange, who spent time in Syracuse, my hometown. Always willing to connect on that level as well.
Two snowy years up there.
Exactly, exactly. All right, Dennis. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Bye.
bye bye.